In this special episode of the Officer Don Memorial Podcast, we're going to share the story of a young man who wanted to be a cop after high school. A young man who was interested in law enforcement. He grew up in southeast Minnesota and was drafted into the Army, who served his country proudly and fought for the United States in Vietnam. A soldier whose family is still waiting for him to come home over 50 years later. Coming up, it's the story of Alan Richard Lloyd.
Law Enforcement Labor Services, also known as LELS, is Minnesota's largest public safety labor union, with over 7,000 Minnesota public safety members serving in all areas of public safety. Law enforcement, 911 dispatch centers, corrections, public safety administrative support personnel, and firefighters. Established in 1977, LELS serves over 260 different public safety agencies and over 450 locals across the state of Minnesota. With their administration, general counsel, 3 staff attorneys, and 14 business agents, LELS provides contract negotiations for better wages and benefits, grievance processing and representation, discipline representation, mediation and arbitration, assistance with representation for post-board hearings, and in-line of duty death benefits for survivor families. Find out more about Law Enforcement Labor Services at lels.org. lels.org.
In 1954, North Vietnam defeated the French colonial administration of Vietnam and wanted to unify North and South Vietnam under a signed communist regime modeled after those of the Soviet Union and China. The South Vietnamese government wanted to preserve a country more aligned with the West, like with the United States. This is when the United States got involved. While U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower helped with a small number of military advisors throughout the 1950s, those numbers dramatically increased beginning in 1961 with President JFK, and then with President L.B. Johnson, who committed the first U.S. ground troops in Vietnam in 1965. During this time, a young 18-year-old Cliff Newman from San Diego, California, enlisted.
I enlisted in 1963. I had a year of college, and I was just 18, and me and 4 other of my friends, we discovered beer and girls all about the same time, you know. Joined the Army with the idea of spending our 3 years and getting out and going back to school. Anyway, I was sent to radar repair school, a 33-week long school. And I had enlisted for what's called airborne unassigned. In other words, I was guaranteed to go to jump school to be a paratrooper, which I had no idea what really entailed. And I was sent to an infantry division, the 2nd Infantry Division in Fort Benning, Georgia, as a radar repairman. So anyway, we had like 2 or 3 radar sets in the division, and about 10 of us highly educated radar repairmen, and we're all young privates, PFCs, whatever, and we were generally just essentially duty soldiers, you know, and we lived in the old barracks with coal burning heaters, so we were shoveling snow and pulling KP and doing all these menial tasks. And I say, this is the Army I signed up for. So anyway, I started soldiering and, paying attention. And long story short, I acquired an O&I MOS, Infantry Operations and Intelligence.
By then, the United States had committed over 500,000 military personnel stationed in Vietnam during the war. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union and China poured weapons, supplies, and advisors into the North, which in turn provided support, political direction, and regular combat troops for the campaign in the South. During the war, a network of roads and paths connecting North Vietnam to South Vietnam became the primary focus for intelligence. This network was known as the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
The Ho Chi Minh Trail, of course, was the infiltration route from the north to the south. And it wasn't just a single trail. There was a major artery coming down from the north through Laos, down into Cambodia and south, with various branches jutting off in the northern part of South Vietnam.
The trail served as the primary supply route for North Vietnamese forces during the war, allowing them to infiltrate troops and supplies, effectively enabling their military campaign against the South Vietnamese government by providing a crucial lifeline for manpower and weaponry across a divided nation. The trail was protected by dense jungle terrain, a multi-route network of paths, strategic placement of anti-aircraft guns and surface-to-air missiles to deter attacks by the U.S., and dedicated engineer units that would quickly deploy to repair damaged sections of the trail after Allied bombing raids. The North also heavily relied on local villagers to provide food, shelter, and intelligence, which made it very difficult for U.S. forces to distinguish between civilians and combatants, to distinguish between the good guys and the bad guys. U.S. forces used recon teams along the Ho Chi Minh Trail to gather intelligence, conduct sabotage, and perform other special operations. These teams were typically made up of 2 to 3 Americans and a number of indigenous people who they called Bru Montaguards. These men were crucial to these teams because of their deep understanding of the jungle and mountainous areas, helping teams navigate and locate enemy positions. They were also skilled trackers and fighters, familiar with guerrilla tactics, helping the U.S. disrupt the Ho Chi Minh Trail supply lines for North Vietnamese fighters.
One of these teams was RT Intruder, Recon Team Intruder. And it was a heavy team. It was a 12-man team, 6 Americans, 6 Indig.
RT Intruder performed highly classified strategic reconnaissance and interdiction missions along the trail, often performed in Laos, which was well beyond radio range and artillery support. Sergeant Alan Richard Lloyd was one of these soldiers serving in this Special Forces team. Alan was born and raised initially in the small community of St. Charles in southeast Minnesota. It's located just west of Rochester. He was born to Father Oliver and Mother Dolores Lloyd. Alan's dad passed away early when Alan was still young back in 1966, which started years of Dolores moving the family around, trying to get by and raise their kids without their father. Alan grew up with an older brother, Marvin, and 2 younger sisters, Deanna D. and Mary. Mary described him as a feisty kid.
When he was young, he was such a feisty little kid. He was into everything. You know, he just enjoyed himself, I think. We lived on a farm out in the country when we were younger, and they used to get into a lot of stuff. My brothers had this thing about linoleum floors. When my parents were gone, they used to play with knives and throw them into the floor. But Alan accidentally got the knife dropped down towards the floor, but it went through his foot. But they tried to hide it from my parents. Well, he started hurting so bad that he had to tell him, so they took him to the emergency room. But, I mean, he paid for it with his foot being sore for a long time, and he was on crutches and everything else. So
Mary recalled Alan's interest in playing with knives and guns. It was BB guns back then.
They used to have BB guns and stuff because they used to shoot those in the house too, and I ended up with one almost in my eye.
In high school, Alan also took a liking to cars. His first car was a black 1957 Chevy.
When he was a senior in high school, he saved up his money from working in a fast food place. It was a Sandy's in Rochester at that time. And he wanted a 57 Chevy, black, with a red pinstripe down the side. But the one he found was an automatic, and he didn't want an automatic. So at that time, he started working for Hubbard Millen, and his boss was also a mechanic on the side, and they put a 3-speed in that car.
Dwayne Hodge was one of Alan's friends growing up.
And he had a rough life, and that nothing was given to him. He worked for everything, and he appreciated what he had. Just the little things in life, and and he didn't overlook anything. So, constant smiling, and always wanted to tell you a joke or just clown around, just do odd stuff that, that just blow your mind. How does he come up with this? I mean, he just had a heart of gold, and that he just sucked you into him. You're just part of him, and happy-go-lucky as you could be, but yet smart, very intelligent, and that.
Alan attended Lewiston High School and graduated in 1967. In 1967, the war was characterized by a significant escalation of U.S. involvement, with a large troop buildup of nearly 500,000 on the ground in South Vietnam. The U.S. also saw growing opposition to the conflict, with large anti-war protests and demonstrations across the country, with massive protests, some led by Dr. Martin Luther King.
Stop the bombing. Let us save our national honor. Stop the bombing and stop the war. Let us save American lives and Vietnamese lives. Let us take a single, instantaneous step to the peace table. Stop the bombing.
The anti-war movement was growing in numbers and militancy. We are no longer interested in merely protesting the war, one organizer said. We are out to stop it.
In 1969, the first draft lottery since World War II began as President Johnson pushed to substantially expand the United States Armed Forces, requiring a dramatic number of men drafted each month. While there were certainly many young men like Cliff Newman who enlisted, a vast majority of the young men who went to fight in Vietnam were in fact drafted. Some coming from communities and families that supported the war efforts, and some coming from other areas of the country that did not.
I got drafted 2 days after I finished college, and I didn't particularly fancy leaving my folks and girl, but none of the other guys do either. But I feel that if my country thinks we should be there, it's given me a place to live for 23 years. It's been real good. I believe that if it thinks I should be there, I think I should be there.
When did you last see your mom, McDonald?
Wednesday morning.
Was she pretty shook?
Oh, not too bad. She took it pretty good.
What about you?
Can't do much about it. Either go over there or go to jail.
You for the war?
No, against it.
Why?
I don't think the United States government should have the right to draft a person and send him to a war that doesn't directly affect the security of the United States.
Alan ended up being drafted in 1969, and he left for Vietnam in July of 1970. Alan's goal in the Army was to get as much training as he could so he could return home and serve in law enforcement. By 1971, Alan had worked his way up to sergeant. He was an E5, a Green Beret serving in the U.S. Army Special Forces, assigned to a MAC-VSOG 5th Special Forces Group during the war. This is where Cliff met Alan back in 1971.
I met him at our base camp, our organizational headquarters in the city of Da Nang. We had a company, a recon company. A normal infantry company is 50 some odd people, and if we had 20, it was a lot. And the parent organization was MAC-VSOG, Military Advisory Command Vietnam Studies and Observations Group. One of those innocuous titles. And it was classified top secret. Prior to 94, I couldn't be having this conversation. Yeah, it was finally declassified.
In early 1971, the reconnaissance team, referred to as RT Intruder, was manned by 3 Special Forces troopers. The team leader, or 1-0, was Captain Ronald Watson, known as Doc. The second in command, or 1-1, was Sergeant Alan Richard Lloyd, who they referred to as Baby Jesus. Raymond Robinson, or Robbie, was the 1-2. The team's makeup would change according to the needs of the mission, but most of the missions were conducted with all 3 Americans and 5 of the Bru tribesmen. Watson was nicknamed Doc because he had a PhD. Robbie was Robbie, because his name was Raymond, and Alan's nickname, well, that one was special. This was a highly trained crew experienced in deploying or getting picked up from choppers with stabo rigs. Now, stabo operations consisted of using 4 120-foot ropes attached to the floor of the helicopter, and each rope secured to one of the stabo harnesses that each team member wore.
The load bearing equipment was a belt that you attached ammo pouches, canteens to, etc., other things you may need, all your gear. This was fitted on a type of harness that went over your shoulders with a couple of snap links, and then you had a rucksack that you carried over this. In that you carried whatever rations you took, some claymore mines, more water, and our insertions were mostly by helicopter landing on an LZ. When you completed a mission, ideally a 5-day mission, you go to a landing zone, an LZ, and you have communication with your package that you went in with. They come and pick you up. If they couldn't, or if you were under fire, you had to get out in a hurry, especially if you were in a heavily wooded area. On this harness you had a couple of snap links. The helicopter would drop a rope. You'd hook in to this harness, which is called a stabo rig, and they would just lift out, and lift you out of the jungle, and off you go.
On one of their training days, John Caviani and Alan Lloyd decided to train with the chopper crews. The helicopter ascended, dangling 2 crewmen, Caviani and Alan on the ropes below. Now, Alan didn't weigh as much as the others, and his rope didn't stretch as much as did the other 3, so consequently, he was about 5 feet higher than the rest. The pilot decided to give his passengers a bath. The training area was on the ocean near Da Nang, and the chopper flew over the breakers and slowly, gently lowered his cargo into the warm waters of the South China Sea. 3 of the trainees found themselves standing knee-deep in the charging surf, with Alan suspended above them. These guys were getting pounded by waves with walls of briny water slapping them in their chests. The water was over their heads and cascading down their backs, while Alan only got the bottom of his boots wet. The chopper then hauled them back into the air and ferried them back to the camp. Now, when the camp residents saw these drowned rats, one of them asked how Alan managed to stay dry. Caviani replied, "Hell, that's baby Jesus. You know he walks on water." The name stuck, and Alan Lloyd wore that name with pride and good humor. After all, Alan said, if you're a member of RT Intruder, you're expected to walk on water. Unlike most units, rank was immaterial in the hierarchy of a recon company. The position of 1-0 went to the man with the most experience or the one who demonstrated the most ability. Teams like RT Intruder spent all their time together, and they all considered each other best friends. It was February 18th, 1971. RT Intruder was being considered for a HALO mission. Now, HALO stands for High Altitude Low Opening. HALO missions were used to deliver people and supplies into hard-to-reach areas. Soldiers would fly in an aircraft anywhere up to 35,000 feet, and then they would free fall into the target area, opening their parachutes only at low altitude, close to the ground, in order not to be detected. Because the team was being considered for a HALO mission, their performance was to be evaluated on a road interdiction mission in the Ho Chi Valley. This valley was a long, narrow 25-mile-long valley along the border of Laos, and was an arm of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, funneling troops and supplies from North Korea to South Korea. At the north end of the valley was the North Vietnamese Army NVA staging area, known as Base Area 611. Sergeant First Class Sammy Hernandez and Sergeant First Class Charles Wesley joined the team as strap hangers. They would determine if RT Intruder got the nod for the HALO training and subsequent missions. Both of these men were already HALO qualified and needed team members that they could trust for these difficult missions. The Ho Chi was probably the most NVA-infested area south of Hanoi. This valley was not a place for amateurs, and a road interdiction mission was doubly hazardous. RT Intruder was judged to be ready. The mission of the road interdiction required that they go in a little heavier than usual, so the addition of 2 Americans was welcomed.
It was a heavy team. It was a 12-man team, 6 Americans, 6 indigenous. And the team leader was an Army captain named Doc Watson, and they call him Doc because he had a PhD, and he was there actually doing research and furthering his studies. And Alan was his assistant team leader, and there were 4 strap anchors that went along. And one of those was a guy named Sammy Hernandez. And Sammy was on the first Halo mission with me, and he and I became really good friends, and we still are today. RT Intruder went in and were moving along a ridge line to their designated location where they were going to set up a radio relay site. And on the way, they were ambushed by a North Vietnamese NVA unit.
Alan's team had choppered into a small clearing, and they waited for the choppers to leave and tried to attune their ears to the jungle noises. Then they started threading their way through the lush jungle growth. They then disappeared into the forest. Traveling east, they soon crossed the Vietnamese border and arrived at the westernmost ridge of the Ho Chi Valley. As soon as they crossed the road, they made contact with a small element and quickly engaged. They quickly realized that a much larger enemy unit was all around them, and they decided they needed to get out. They called for a stabo extraction. Now remember, the stabo rig, or stabilized body rig, was a harness that was designed to enable rapid extraction of reconnaissance soldiers by helicopter. The stabo rig allowed soldiers to quickly hook to a cable and get pulled out of the danger area without the helicopter landing. The harness system allowed soldiers free hands so they could use their weapons as they're being pulled out. Robbie had recovered a rucksack or a backpack with several documents from an NVA courier that they had engaged with. So it was decided that he would go out on the first helicopter with Wesley and 2 of the brood. The chopper struggled to lift them in the thin mountain air, and it almost crashed. Because the first helicopter had so much trouble, only 3 Montaguards were extracted on the next lift. This left Watson, Lloyd, and Hernandez for the last helicopter. The first group landed back at the 101st Airborne Division Fire Base. The final helicopter went back to pick up Allen, Watson, and Hernandez. The 3 strapped into their stable rigs while the helicopter took on heavy gunfire.
As the final helicopter was pulling off, again on strings or with their stable rigs, it was shot down. Because of the terrain, the helicopter was kind of pancaked in. Well, miraculously, Sammy Hernandez's rope broke. It snagged in the tree or something. It broke. He fell back to the ground about 30 feet through the trees. And the other 2, including Alan, they were like slung like they're on slingshots into the ground. And word came back to Da Nang, to our base camp, that the whole team was down and presumed killed. And I'm getting ready to leave country by this time. I'm done. I'm not going back to the field anymore. I've paid my dues. And word came back that Sammy was on one of the people missing and was, they're all were missing at that time, presumed killed. And I thought, oh crap. So I went up to our Tactical Operations Center, and they were putting together a bright light team to go in. And I had a lot of experience, and I wanted to go in and see if I could, maybe find Sammy. So yeah, they'd love to have you. So off we went.
The following day, on February 19th, the bright light team that Cliff had been assigned to was inserted at the crash site to search the area.
We were at it's called TOC, the Tactical Operations Center, at our base camp in Da Nang. The team had all geared up and went to the launch site at Phu Bai. From there, we flew into the AO, the area of operations, with the mission of recovering what and who we could. We went into the same landing zone that RT Intruder originally went in on the day before, which normally is not a good thing, but that area is so steep you couldn't get in there. We landed mid-afternoon, and this is in Laos. We trekked back across the border in Vietnam where the crash was, and we located the site. And it was not a pretty sight. The helicopter was down. It was like on its side. Pilot and co-pilot were still strapped in their seats, although they were burned pretty much beyond recognition. One of the door gunners was thrown out, and he was embedded in a tree, actually. He was obviously deceased, and we found a leg of the other door gunner, and the rest of them was underneath the crash. So we put what we could in body bags and any papers they had, etc. And the weather comes in every day around 3 o'clock in that part of the world. It's very high and it's very wet. It's very high. It's hill 1528 if you look on a map, and that's 1,528 meters high. So it's a little over 3,000 feet roughly, which is high for that part of the world. So we had to spend the night in ROM. We had to remain overnight. And again, like I said, I'm not the team leader of this bright light team. I'm just along by my friend Sammy. So anyway, the team leader was a good guy, and I knew everybody on the team. And we moved to a RON site. And on that movement, which was about 25, 30, maybe 50 meters, we found the bodies of Watson and Lloyd. And we had a medic with us, and he ascertained they were deceased. And our plan was to spend the night, get up, and move back where we could finish up our recovery efforts, get the remains of Watson and Lloyd, and get out. We had no intention of making any enemy contact. So we set up our defensive position, and I was at the top, and we were on the side of a hill, and I'm at the top of this oval-shaped defensive position, and I put 2 claymore mines out in front of me, and we spent the night. And about 7-ish in the morning, I heard and saw movement up above me to the front. They started raining grenades on us and small arms fire, and I fired my 2 claymores, turned and started down the hill where the rest of the team had moved to a better defensive position. And that's where we stayed for the next 5 hours or so. The firing eased off a bit, and an HH-53, a Jolly Green Giant, which was actually still a SAR aircraft, an Air Force Sea Air Rescue aircraft, was brought in to get us. And he had a jungle penetrator, a device that was lowered, and a winch with a heavy ball, so to speak, at the bottom that can break through brush, designed to rescue down pilots. And I had taken over the team by this time, and I kept myself and the team leader, named Danzer, and our medic for the last 3 to go out. And so on the way up, the winch gave way because our combined weight was a little too much for it. So I disconnected and stayed on the ground for about a minute and a half, and they come back and got me. So we did get out, and again, we never could recover what we wanted to.
Mary remembers the day her mother was notified.
Well, they came to the door. I mean, there were 2 of them, and gave us papers for them. And then they kindly told us that we had to have a memorial service within the 90 days there. And that was right after February 18th. So they made us have a memorial service.
Memorial services were held at Bethel Lutheran Church in Rochester, with the Reverend Erling Tungseth officiating.
It was a big funeral. Bethel Lutheran Church on 3rd Avenue in Rochester, very big church. It was full. The cars were just lined up all over. Oh, it was packed. Some of the girls that he went to school with in Iota, 3 of them sang at his funeral. And we had a big 8x10 picture of him in his uniform at the front, and they sang to him.
It's hard to imagine what this family, his friends, and this community were going through, honoring Alan's service with his memorial, without him, without knowing where he was, without any closure. It's unfortunate, but a reality of war. Their remains were left behind out of necessity to protect the lives of the search team who found them. In 2003, 30-plus years after the crash, Cliff would be asked to go back to Vietnam again.
In 2003, I got a call from what was then named TFFA, Joint Task Force for Full Accounting. And they were the precursor of, or the follow-on edit of JCRC. And they asked if I would be willing to go back with the team and search that site. And I said, sure. And myself and two of the other guys who were on the Bright Light mission, a guy named Wesley and a guy named McLaughlin, went back with the team. And it was really interesting going back to Vietnam. And I was a little nervous, because there's a little share there somewhere with my name on it. But we were treated with, and I thought I'd see an AK-47 on every corner. And we saw a few soldiers in the airport. And that was it. And we stayed in this 5-star hotel in Da Nang, right on the beach, right across the road from where our camp used to be. But it was not a well-planned mission. And you have counterparts. You still have counterparts if you go in some kind of official business over there. And they were supposed to have cut a landing zone, an LZ, up on this mountain. Well, they never did. So we actually landed in the Ashaw Valley and attempted to climb the mountain. And there's no government helicopters, so it's charter. It's a charter. Owned by the government, but still a charter company. An old Russian Mi-17, scariest thing ever flew in. It was smoke and oil flapping around. Anyway, we land and we attempt to climb this mountain, and there's no way in hell we can. And we only had one day. They weren't going to stay. We couldn't spend the night. So we got like halfway up and had to come back down. There's no way we could get up there. That was a blowing mission, but I got a trip back to Vietnam. I should say a lot of fun. But it was interesting, very interesting.
Cliff would be asked to go back to Vietnam again in 2015.
And then in 2015, I got a call. I went back again. I was by myself this time. And the Vietnamese counterpart that kind of runs the show had a site, and he did have an LZ, but there was lack of communication, and he had an entirely different crash in mind. So we were like, we were like a couple of kilometers away from where we should have been. So we didn't get there.
Cliff would go back one more time in 2018.
I went back in 2018, and we actually got with a new group of intel people, and politics were a lot better. There's a lot more cooperation between the Laotians and the Vietnamese, and they actually did have a LZ on top of this hill, 1528, and we did land. They had a trail going down to where the crash site was, and I remember, I recognized the area. I remember there was a little, very, very steep, and I remember there was like a gap, an opening in the trees, that I could look out over the Ashaw Valley, and I saw that same gap when I was back. So I knew we were in the area, and my GPS, they figured we were like within 6 meters the most, which is pretty well on top of it. But again, there's no evidence there. Now, that being said, we also recognized what we saw. I saw what I thought might have been this cliff that we fell over trying to get to this defensive position. And the team, another team from the DPAA, went back a couple of years ago, and they found some stuff. They found a lot of spent cartridges, and they found some turnbuckles that were used in the flooring of the helicopter when you drop ropes out of the devices that hold these ropes in place. They found an unexploded claymore mine. Whatever was solid was carted off by natives. Yeah, I mean, in fact, there's a new village just not too many meters down the hill from where the site is, and so anything solid enough to be used was used. And the thing also, when we were there in 2018, it's very windy, and the ground is very moist, and you could see the roots actually moving from the wind and the moisture. So the terrain is always changing. So the case is still open. What they have to do is go in, and it's an actual archaeological dig. And I'm not a religious guy, but getting my older age, I kind of believe in souls, if you will. And there's 6 souls still up there in that mountain. Alan Lloyd's one of them.
The crew and passengers lost on February 18th are among nearly 600 Americans listed as missing in Laos. Although the Pathet Lao stated publicly they held American prisoners of war, they insisted they would only be released from Laos. Because the U.S. didn't recognize the communist government of Laos, no negotiations were ever conducted for Americans held there. Not one American has been released from Laos. As thousands of reports mount indicating that many American prisoners are still held in Southeast Asia, one wonders if we will ever be able to bring the Vietnam War to an honorable end by bringing all of our soldiers home. In 1995, Vietnam released its official estimate of war dead. As many as 2 million civilians on both sides, and over 1 million North Vietnamese and Viet Cong fighters. U.S. military numbers estimate as many as 250,000 South Vietnamese soldiers died in the war. The Vietnam Veterans Memorial Wall in Washington, D.C. has the names of over 58,000 members of the U.S. Armed Forces who died or are missing as a result of the war. In 1973, the United States listed over 2,600 Americans as unaccounted for from the entire Vietnam War. By October of 2022, according to the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency, around 1,600 Americans remain unaccounted for, of which around 488 were classified as non-recoverable, 1,000 were classified as further pursuit, and 90 as deferred. Those classified as non-recoverable due to the likelihood of not being able to locate their remains. Now, those classified as further pursuit, MIA POW, are cases where investigators are actively looking for remains or information. And a deferred class is not currently being actively investigated due to limited information or access restrictions. Retired Command Sergeant Major Harry Kerr, who is also a retired captain from the Olmsted County Sheriff's Office in southeast Minnesota, is one of the people helping the Lloyd family try and bring Ellen home. He also served in Vietnam.
Right now, the DOD, if you check the DOD website, that's what we're trying to get changed, that it says 1971, KIA 1971 body non-recoverable. And so if we go back, this is a joint venture between the Military Order of the Purple Heart, Lloyd Swenson chapter, because we went to both the Lloyd family and the Swenson family asking if we could use their names. We didn't have to do that, but we just felt better by doing that. And Mary Lloyd gave us permission, so it was named after Sergeant Alan Richard Lloyd and Corporal Curtis Swenson. We asked the Swensons. Mary and the Swensons are associate members. That means relatives of people who have received the Purple Heart. So we were the POW MIA Riders Association was started in 2011, and our Military of the Purple Heart chapter was started in 2016. We have done a number of joint ventures before, fundraisers, programs, events. And it was in November of 2023 at one of our Prisoner of War Missing in Action Riders Association meetings that I brought up, since 2011 when the chapter started, the Riders Association started, there were 83,000 some odd listed. Now we're down to 81,000 some odd listed as missing in action or prisoners of war. Instead of trying to put emphasis on bringing everyone home, let's try just emphasis and pinpoint our effort on one. And we all agreed that the logical one was Alan Lloyd because he was local. We had family in the area that we knew and were involved with in our Purple Heart chapter. And so we also had the grid from the Green Berets that were on site as a part of the recovery team that got under heavy fire, by Cliff, his story. And they had to leave and couldn't get permission to go back, official permission to go back. So we have the grid, which that grid puts it in Laos. So we have Senator Klobuchar's office, Jack McGregor, is helping us. And we're trying to get the DOD and the DPAA to change the official record from Vietnam to Laos, and then push them one more time to see if we can't get the recovery team into that area. In our research so far, and we're now following up more on that. We had heard that there was a fixed wing that went down in Laos not too far away from the same location. And we have the name of that, some people that were on that. And so we're trying to, one, we've got relatives of a couple of those people we're going to contact. We're trying to get that record of that fixed wing aircraft and get that record, because we feel if we go to the DPA and the DOD with more than just one story, but a number of stories that would lead to maybe more pressure to go there for recovery, it would help us. You know, our thing is to try and bring him home before the family has perished. And, you know, and his sister and his brothers are in their mid-late 70s to early 80s. So we'd like to do that, or bring it to conclusion that definitely not recoverable. And so if we bring him home, then we'll have a welcome home party. And one of the first things that the contacts we had with Klobuchar's office is, why are you raising money? You know, and my answer was, we're fighting the U.S. government. It takes money. It takes money to bring attention to an issue. It takes money to research an issue. And so then the first meeting that Jack McGregor from Senator Klobuchar's office came to our committee meeting, that joint Purple Heart POW-MIA committee meeting for our project, he asked, what if we can't do this or he's brought home? Well, if we come to an end and there's money left over, we will look for another Southern Minnesota MIA and family that we can work with to try and bring that person home, because we're in that business of never giving up and never forgetting.
As retired Command Sergeant Major Harry Kerr stated, there are still 81,000 U.S. soldiers who have died or are missing from war. 58,000 of them are from the Vietnam War alone. Among that list of names is Sergeant Alan Richard Lloyd. As a Green Beret Sergeant, also known as a Special Forces Sergeant, Alan was one of those heroes who were considered some of the highest skilled soldiers within the U.S. Army.
He's the best of the best, you know. If you listen to the Ballad of the Green Beret, I think Barry Sadler, I mean, that's him. He was true to his country, and he was an American. He's an American soldier.
The Lloyd family is just one of tens of thousands of families waiting for closure, praying for their loved one, their hero, their soldier, to return home. For the families of fallen heroes like Alan, who have yet to be brought home, not having that closure and waiting is the toughest part.
I want to know for a fact. I mean, to me, he's always with me because I have his pictures and stuff all over the place. And his flags and everything are in my apartment here in the corner, and I got it set up for him. I just assumed he would come back, that he was just out doing a maneuver or something. I miss him.
Dwayne and Alan were friends in high school. Alan ended up moving away before their senior year, and Dwayne lost touch with his friend. Remember, back then there were no cell phones, no social media, no internet, so it was a lot tougher to keep in contact with friends who actually moved away. The two friends went their separate ways, graduating from high school in different towns in southeast Minnesota. Both of these men would end up serving in Vietnam. Never knowing about the other one's service, both were actually awarded a Purple Heart, yet only one came back. Dwayne had no idea until years later that Alan had been drafted, that he went to Vietnam, that he was killed, and that he never came home. Dwayne never got a chance to attend the funeral. He never got a chance for any closure. He never got a chance to say goodbye to his friend. Dwayne would later join the local military Order of the Purple Heart in Rochester, and as one of their commanders was instrumental in getting Alan Richard Lloyd's name attached to the chapter.
When I came home having a Purple Heart, I was commander of the Rochester Purple Heart chapter. So I basically started it when they first introduced it, and then when I got commander of it, then I changed it to Lloyd Swenson. At first, Kay Swenson and Dave, and after they lost their son Curtis. So at that time, it was brought up at one of our meetings, so I wanted to name it, and that there, and they had Alan Lloyd's name to it. So we're now Lloyd Swenson, Chapter 7110, and 71 is the year Alan was killed, and 10 is the year 2010 is when Curtis Swenson was killed. So it has a whole meaning to it now.
Lance Corporal Curtis Swenson was a 20-year-old Marine from Rochester who died supporting combat operations in Afghanistan. What can we do to help? To help honor the amazing men and women who serve, to honor their families, to honor those we've lost, to honor those families left behind, and honor those who never made it home.
It was about 15 years ago. We had two congressmen that wanted the POW, prisoner of war, missing in action flag taken off of federal buildings. And so we pushed back on that. We organized a pushback. And same thing, it's like KTTC, one of their young reporters a few years ago did a report on us, and they said, Palmia. Well, so on our shirts now, we spell out prisoner of war missing in action because the younger generations don't understand POW or MIA. That was the first time we heard it on TV, and we've heard it since again this year from another channel. Just a young person not knowing they're reading, their script, and it looks like Palmia. And so on our shirts, on all of our stuff now, we spell out prisoner of war missing in action so there's no misunderstanding. And the same thing is that people ask in donations to help with the fight, just understanding what prisoner of war and missing in action is, and trying to find out, do we have members in our community that have had prisoners of war in their family history, or still have missing action members in their family? And then the other is supporting when things come up like National Recognition Day in September, prisoner of war, MIA, missing in action, National Recognition Day. Come out and support those things. Support the veterans groups. There are about 40,000 of those 81,000 that are at the bottom of the ocean. With all the sea burials that happened during World War II, with all the shippage that went down, and we'll never recover them. Why does it matter 70 years or 50 years or 30 years later? And I tell them the story of Jacob Wetterling. Jacob Wetterling was snatched off his street not too far from his home, and they looked for 25 years. And finally they made a deal with the devil, literally. If he would show them where he was, they'd take him off death row. Well, they made the deal. He showed him, and he was 500 or 1,000 meters from where he was snatched. And now, instead of and out of that tragedy came a positive because of the Wetterling Foundation. How many families did they help bring children home to or find? And yet now they don't go to bed at night wondering about their son. They know where he's at. So the same thing with veterans is families. They need to know where they are and their home.
Over 50 years after the Vietnam War, the United States, Vietnam, and much of the rest of the world continued to struggle with both its legacy and the consequences of this brutal and costly conflict. During and after the war, our country struggled with our state and federal leaders, questioning the war, why we were there, how should we utilize our military, concerns about the draft, the lives lost, and the devastation left behind. Many referred to it as the tragic era of Vietnam. 2.7 million Americans served in Vietnam, nearly 10% of their generation. These young Americans were asked to stand up and serve our country and to fight. Whether they believed in the war efforts or not, these men and women, these heroes, they put service before self, and they sacrificed everything fighting for our country, leaving behind their families, their spouses, their kids, and their communities. Many made it back, and over 300,000 were wounded while serving. In the end, more than 58,000 American military personnel were killed, along with nearly 1.5 million North and South Vietnamese troops and at least 2 million civilians. To put this into perspective, that's equal to the population of Wyoming, Vermont, Alaska, North Dakota, and South Dakota combined. For those brave soldiers who served in Vietnam and were fortunate enough to come home, they weren't met with parades and celebrations that we greeted World War II soldiers with. They returned to a society deeply divided and disillusioned by the war. The unpopularity of the war leading to a stigma surrounding military service. Many veterans feeling unsupported by their communities. Many struggling with civilian life, with physical and psychological injuries and PTSD. Today, most Americans finally recognize the sacrifices and contributions of Vietnam veterans. And one of the most recognized awards in our armed forces is the Purple Heart. It's the oldest military award still presented to American service members, awarded to any member of the U.S. Armed Forces who have been wounded, killed, or died of wounds received against an enemy of the United States. This award differs from most other decorations in that an individual is not recommended for the decoration. Rather, the service member earns it by their service and sacrifice. It's also unique in that it's awarded regardless of rank, position, or status. Those who've been awarded this medal made great sacrifices while serving our country, while defending the freedoms we enjoy today. Some of the heroes awarded Purple Hearts survived and came home from the war, like Harry Kerr and Dwayne Hodge. Some of our heroes who were awarded the Purple Heart, like Alan Lloyd, paid the ultimate sacrifice and never made it home. With our country so divided, and young and old on campuses and streets all over the country, protesting issues that are important to them. Some of these protests are peaceful, some aren't. Some protesting issues they believe they understand. Some issues they obviously don't. Either way, it's easy to forget why we have these freedoms. The freedom to protest, to speak out for what we believe in, to live in a free country like the United States, where we have the freedom to pray or not pray, the freedom to bear arms, the freedom to speak out against our government or to speak out against one party or another, one politician or another, the freedom to laugh, the freedom to hate, and the freedom to love. These rights, these freedoms, please remember they are not free. Throughout history, men and women fought for the rights we enjoy today. Men and women who signed up or were drafted, who took risks and made sacrifices that most wouldn't to protect freedoms that most take all too for granted. Soldiers that believed in service before self, some who made it home, many who did not, and most who would forever be changed by their battles. Battles that most would never take on, sacrifices most would never make to protect freedoms that all too many take for granted. Freedom that heroes like Alan fought and died for. If you take away anything from this episode, from Alan's story, please remember that freedom is not free. And because of that, we must always remember those who fought and those who gave all for us. It wasn't how he died that made Alan Richard Lloyd a hero. Alan served his country honorably and proudly until the end. It's how Alan lived and how he served that truly made Alan Richard Lloyd an American hero. A hero that will never be forgotten. There are links in the show notes to find out more about how you can help the Military Order of the Purple Heart in their efforts to bring Alan Lloyd back home, how you can help this organization and this family find closure. There's also a link to his memorial page on our website, as well as some photos of Alan. Thank you for listening and learning about this fallen hero. And thanks for listening and supporting this special edition of the Officer Down Memorial Podcast.